Hey, John.
Okay.
Morning, Steve.
How are you?
Good. We've got Sheriff Nelson in the audience, and that's all so far.
Wow.
Oh, and well, of
Safe.
course, we have Ryan Pindell, but he's hidden behind 4 or 5 screens. I can't hardly see him.
Jeff, you should have been there last night for our first guest.
That's what I heard. I seen the video, so I
Well,
didn't understand it, but I saw it.
it's a heck of a way to win friends and influence people.
Yes.
It didn't work so well to get his taxes lowered, however.
Well, we had my mom in a memory care unit, not going rough work.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Steve.
2 shifts or when they were in school, they had to do, they wanted to run a couple shifts and do a report or whatever, you know. I had a couple gals.
Yeah, no, this one's a little more, so we put them in dispatch and check it out, just get the whole county experience.
That's a good thing.
I think so. I
Where's he
mean,
going to school?
was it?
Well, Roxanne,
Well,
How
hi,
are ya?
Steve. I'm good. How are you?
good. I can't embarrass Debbie on her anniversary.
Next time.
That's good. I was hoping she was gonna take the day off. I hope they went to Duluth or someplace where it's like 42 degrees.
Yeah. I suppose, Steve, you're going to have the whole summer off with no county fair, huh?
Well, I'm kind of liking it so far. No. Actually, we did have a work day the other day. So tomorrow morning, we're gonna turn the water on because we got a horse show coming up. And if the 4-H have a 1-day show or whatever, just on the west end by the horse arena and cattle barn stuff.
Yeah.
Two tablets, laptop, desktop.
I just got an email, Roxanne, there are only 10 fairs that have not canceled yet.
Wow.
And some of them, it's a timing issue, and some of them are being bullheaded and said they're having a fair come hell or high water. So I don't know how they're gonna do that, because they're not gonna have a carnival. Because I don't think there's a carnival that's gonna play in the state of Minnesota. About half to 2/3 of the carnivals that play in Minnesota winter in the south. And I know we've had a couple meetings with all the carnival operators and the Armstrong shows, which play a ton of fairs in western Minnesota. They've been stuck in at a big cattleman's show in Texas. They got shut down a day and a half into that run in March, and their equipment is still there.
Wow.
And their workers, a lot of their workers were on the JB2 visas from Colombia and South America, and they got sent home. So they don't have those people. So they're in a more of a bind probably than a couple carnivals that winter here in Minnesota. They do their stuff. And
Can you camera on it or?
I see there's an app now where it lists all the
Should
state fair
I move it
food
closer
you
to
can
me?
buy around the state of Minnesota.
What's that?
Hey, Jeff, do you guys do?
Hi, Becky.
Is Commissioner Steve Chafee on the line?
I've not seen him yet.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Did you get it, Ryan? Hey, Steve, can you say something else so Ryan can pick up which of the callers you are?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay? I know I've been on it for a little while, and I tell you what, it's been breaking up a lot. So I don't know. And I had that same problem last night. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you fine, Steve. I know there's been some issues with cell service yesterday and into today, so that may be affecting your line.
Yeah, and like I say, it's I've lost it like 2 or 3 times already this morning. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll get it through.
Joseph keyboard.
Thanks, Steve.
Station.
I know last night we had some issues, but today, since I've been on, it's been fine. And it is 10 o'clock here, so we will start the meeting by saying the meeting will be held in person and via WebEx video phone conference. No more than 2 county commissioners will be present in the meeting room. The public may join the meeting via WebEx or in person at the meeting room. If joining the meeting in person, the total number of persons, including commissioners, cannot exceed 10, and social distancing will be in effect. The governor of the state of Minnesota has issued Executive Order 20-01, declaring a peacetime emergency and coordinating Minnesota's strategy to protect Minnesotans from COVID-19. On March 24th, the Pine County Board of Commissioners declared a local emergency for Pine County. Based on these conditions, the chair of the Pine County Board of Commissioners has determined that the requirements of Minnesota Statute 13D-021 Subdivision 1 have been met and is not practical or prudent for all members of the county board to meet in person. And then it goes on, the public is invited to join the meeting in person or remotely, and the phone calls or phone numbers are listed. Anyway, I would like to call the meeting to order, and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. That's almost hard to do when you got a lot of different voices coming in. Anyway, public forum, is anybody on the line or in person that wishes to speak in public forum?
Mr. Chair, there is no public in the meeting room. Sheriff
Okay,
Nelson is the only other person in the meeting room.
all right. We'll move to adopt the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, with the Investment Finance Committee report, there is a resolution number 20-36 for consideration that's not called out on the agenda as an action item. So I just wanted to draw your attention that it was in the packet and it is an action item.
What was the number, Dave?
The number is 20-36 and it's related to the liquor licensing renewal fees.
Thank you. Any other? If not, we'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Ludwig will move as amended.
McRae, second.
Got a motion by Ludwig, seconded by McRae. And any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll. Roxanne, do you know how that works?
I do.
All right.
District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that passes. We'll move to approval of the minutes of the June 2nd County Board minutes and summary for publications.
McRae will move them.
Moral second.
Got a motion by McRae, second by Moore. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
That passes. We'll move on to the minutes of boards, reports, and correspondence, which include the Pine County Housing Redevelopment Authority, HRA, meeting minutes from February 26th and April 22nd, 2020. Pine County Zoning Board minutes of April 23rd, 2020, and Initiative Foundation correspondence of May 19th, 2020. And the Pine County Chemical Health Coalition minutes, June 8th, 2020, and the City of Sandstone Wellhead Protection Plan, Part 2, June 8th, 2020.
Ludwig will move.
Morrell second.
Chafee second.
We'll take Chafee on that one. Ludwig moves, Chafee seconds. Any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore. District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
Okay, that passes, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Hopefully you've all looked through that. There is one large expenditure in there, but it's not a surprise. We've been working on this for a couple of years, and that is the squad and body cameras. So we are moving ahead with that and ready to begin the ordering of those. So we need,
Morrell moved the consent agenda.
okay.
McRae second.
Got a motion by Moore, second by Mikrot for the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes. So now we can get to the meat of the agenda. Not that the other stuff is not important, but we'll get a report from the Facilities Committee.
Hey, Matt, you want to kind of go with that a little bit? I'm still trying to find my notes here, and then I can fill in.
I can, sure. We had our meeting on June 3rd, and of course, we discussed the COVID and what's going on in the county and the plexiglass that's getting added here and there. And we're looking at putting up permanent glass barriers in the courtrooms and in the courthouse, the front counter, the roll counter, and some of the jail. The glass barriers will be added protection and will enhance the worker safety of that area. And it's our belief that the work we do will be covered under the CARES Act, and we're getting some updated quotes on that.
Commissioner, can we just back up and make sure that there's clarity on the proposal for the permanent glass?
Sure.
That this would be in front of the row offices, auditor, treasurer, recorder, assessor, land and zoning, and it would be installed, it'd be 36 inches high with a 4-inch gap from the bottom of the glass to the counter. And so it wouldn't be full protection, but it would be a barrier for viral aerosol transmission as well, an enhancement for security for people couldn't jump over the counter or throw things, et cetera. So it is a somewhat of a security upgrade, but it will permanently change the look and feel of the front office area there.
Thank you. Yeah, I could go into more detail, I suppose. But, and jail, of course, is on-site visiting is appointment only, so I believe, so. And the courthouse has been open to the public for walk-in since June 1st. We know all that. So the meat and potatoes of the meeting, I thought, was when we talk about the new courthouse in the South Pine County Government Center, and how we're working on, getting employees back into the new courthouse, and the number of employees that are working out teleworking or remote working or whatever you want to call it. So we're looking at changing you would remember it as the old social services part in the new building, reestablishing that as the social services again, or whatever department it's going to be from Health and Human Services. And we can fit 30 to 35 in there, roughly. And some staff may be moved to the North Pine Government Center, and then the rest of the staff will probably continue to work remotely and report in as needed. Basically hot seats some of the cubicles or office space that's there. So that, and then there was some discussion about the opening of SWCD, and then the county administrator, David Minke, had shared discussion with the SWCD head, Jill, that they could open when they felt comfortable and in a manner that they felt comfortable on the sheriff's office building up in Sandstone. We reviewed and looked at the telework planning and impacts. There's a study there and a policy that we looked at, and I think that's developing pretty nicely. Gosh, it was pretty thought out. And we discussed some of the utilities that are taking place at the North Pine Government Center, this building, and the flagpole is included. Get a taller flagpole, and the way the utilities are, we were thinking about moving the flagpole to a different location, but the underground utilities are in the way, and so we're just going to use that same base where this one is, and just put a taller flagpole on that, which makes the most sense. And we also discussed the signage out by Highway 61 and North Highway 23 out there, so that's marked out there. I can't think of anything else. You got anything you want to add, Josh?
Well, I'd just like to say we've been thinking about that glass on them row offices for quite a while. And
yeah.
Obviously taxes are a hot topic, as we seen last night. So a little bit of a barrier for people like that would just lose their mind coming into the row offices, I think is nothing but added protection for the people that are there. So I think it's obviously something that needs to be done, and I appreciate the staff looking into it and getting it done. So
yeah.
Otherwise, that's all I.
Thank you. I do have a question for you and Becky and probably anybody. But as we plan to transition to more home permanent office space, those people that need to come in occasionally, will there be a designated spot? I heard you talk about more of a hot seat where it'd be shared with several people.
That's just my idea.
Is that what we're thinking, or will if I was a home worker, would I have a little corner of a place where I could come and set my laptop up and work in the courthouse if I had to be in court that day or whatever?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is Dave Minke. So the short answer is it depends, right? But
Yep.
looking at the workers who are primarily teleworkers, meaning that they work at home except under special circumstances. They might need to come in periodically for meetings or whatever it is. Their regular workplace is at home. They will not have an assigned workstation at a county facility. We will have a series of shared workstations that they would use. And it's called hoteling in the telework
Yep.
world. So you would
Yep.
bring your laptop, we'd have it set up with docking stations and all of that, so people could, do their work when they needed to do that. But we gain the efficiency of not having everyone have an assigned office space that way, and that's what makes the space work.
Right. And I do understand that it's probably still a work in progress and will continue to be for a while. The other question to that is, if in my mind, as we transition to that, we're going to need more IT help. Do we have enough space for IT, or do we have to look at expansion in that area?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so we would have enough space to add another IT staff without having to add any facility additions. And
Okay.
IT can be pretty mobile as well.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Chafee, I do have a quick question. You're talking about putting glass on all the offices that are in the front there, like the auditor, all along there, correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my question is then, and maybe this is for David too, what kind of protection do we have in the administrator's office for somebody like Jen, who really does meet the public? Or is there talk about putting anything up there?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Chafee, at this point, we have not discussed security enhancements in those areas. We have a few of those places. Extension would be another one where there is walk-in traffic to what is a small office. So we certainly can keep that in mind as we move forward. And I guess just for the coronavirus response, we do have portable plexiglass shields that we've deployed to various places. So they're not a security enhancement, but they are a barrier for aerosol transmission.
Yeah, and I'm thinking more of that than probably security when it comes to some of these other offices, like, your the administrator or those other offices, David, and you've got something in place. I didn't know if you did, so I was just curious.
Yep. And in fact, I can send you a photo of what we have set up, just so you have an idea what it is.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I just was curious if they were, what you were doing on that. So, thank you.
Steve, Chafee, there's going to be some security to this glass, but it's not like bulletproof glass or anything like that. It's like a tempered type glass, so it's clear. You'll see through it. A slot to pass paper underneath, and there is some level of security. They can't jump over the counter and get at anyone. It works like that. So.
Right. No, and I understand that. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you. It looks like we have no action that needs to take place, but thanks for that good report and keep us up to date. I do have one more question. Maybe I missed it, but as we transition people to that back hallway, are we still thinking of making a more direct route into that area? Or are we still people going to go around?
I think right now it's go around.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ludwig, I don't know that we don't have the floor plan finalized. In the previous iteration where we were talking about adding an annex and adding some of the HHS staff to the existing courthouse, we did talk about some interior changes that would give HHS space at the front counter. so that when you walked in the doors, you could access HHS. And so we're gonna review all of that and figure out how to best serve the public with the changes that we're proposing.
I understand you guys are doing an awesome job, and you can't figure it out in an hour or two. And I know sometimes the best plans you make, you have to modify them 3 months into working with it. So anyway, thanks for the work. Investment Finance Committee met. The minutes are attached. I think it was an interesting meeting, and we live in interesting times. And if you're on the borrowing end of finances, it's probably a good time. If you got a way to pay back your debt. If you're us who have some money to invest as a county, because it comes in and then we get a big lump here, and then we parcel it out for a few months, and then we get another big wad of it. So we have money to invest. We just, our investment return has pretty much gone in the tank. Does that summarize it, Kelly? So we at times probably could make 2 or 3% of our total levy dollars on interest. But I think we'll be lucky to make, what, 1% as of now. I think the one topic of discussion, and Matt, maybe you want to talk about it, is the abatement of the liquor tax, the ones that the county has control over, which are only the liquor stores that do not have a local jurisdiction that grants them a license. And how many are there, Kelly? 10, 12? 13. Well, I was close. But anyway, Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, I can take it a little bit. So there, with COVID and businesses being shut down, and of course, we know the off sale remained open, so it isn't impacted the same as the people that were off sale only. So we discussed that what we could do because of the licensure as an annual license that, to sell the liquor. So because there was a 3-month closure due to COVID, we decided to abate 3 months from the license fee of $1,500, which turns out to be $375. So for those businesses that had to be closed, their annual license is going to cost them $1,125 instead of $1,500. Not much, but it's not fair to have them pay the license tax basically if they're not able to have a business open. So that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it?
I think so. And it just the mechanics of it, they will not get a check. They will get a reduction on their new license.
Right.
So if they were in business and now they're not going to be in business, they will not get a check back, right?
That's correct, the way the resolution is written.
Right.
Yes. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I'd just like to say thanks to the investment committee because I think that was a pretty good way of looking at that. And hopefully the businesses that were affected do appreciate it because I think that's pretty thoughtful and a good way to go. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Kelly she did the legwork on it, and it just seems to make, we're just trying to be sensible, and it's not going to put us in bankruptcy. It's not going to keep them out of bankruptcy, but I think it's a gesture of good faith. So,
are you going to talk about, Mr. Chair? Are you going to talk about the Ellers thing?
Yeah, you can take that one, Matt.
Okay, yeah, so we also had discussion on our, the courthouse, bonds that we were issued in 2012 when we redid at that time, and the rates are coming down. So we have a call date of February 1st, 2021, where we could refinance. And if we do that, and we can save $663,000, well, over that actually, 663,165 is the savings we, so we're going to do that. And we also had some discussion about, lowering the timeline with those dollars up. It made the most sense just to keep the loan term the same and save the money over the length of the loan. Kelly, is there anything I should add to that? That's kind of the way I understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a good start. The only other tidbit I guess I would add is that we can't start that process till 90 days before that call of February 1st, 2021. So
Right.
come about October, we'll start to talk about it more in depth.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'd like to circle back to resolution 20-36, and that is in your packet. We would recommend that as a, so if somebody would like to make a motion to that effect.
I'll move. Ludwig will move that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Moral second.
And Moore seconds it. Is there any discussion on that? Pardon me? Somebody said something.
You might be hearing from people in the lobby here, Steve.
Oh, okay. Okay. If no more discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
District 3, Commissioner Chafee. District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you guys. I assume we're voting. Could you, where are we at? Because I lost.
We're voting on the resolution to abate the taxes for 3 months to the liquor stores that were affected.
That's what
Yep.
Aye.
Okay.
Sorry about
District, okay, thank you. District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the personnel.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We discussed one more thing, that restricted fund balance.
Oh, yes. Thank
And
you.
the county has a lot of restricted funds and, money that can't be spent. And Auditor Schroeder revisited that with us and suggested that when we come to our budget discussions, that we have a committee meeting that's just devoted to what we do with our restricted funds. So I want to throw that out there too.
Yep. A good point. Thank you for
Okay.
remembering that. Now we will move on to the Personnel Committee report.
Chief, you want to give it? Or?
I would, but I might lose you right in the middle of it. I've lost you guys about 3 times now. So.
Okay, I'll take it then if you. So we met on June 9th, and we made the following recommendations. From the county attorney's office, we acknowledge the retirement of county attorney office manager Terry Jansen effective July 31st, 2020, and authorize the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. In the jail, we acknowledge the resignation of Correction Officer Jennifer Neal effective June 5th, 2020, and authorize the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. In zoning, we acknowledge the resignation of environmental technician Leah Hart, effective June 12, 2020, and authorize the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur. And we also approve the restructure of the current zoning and environmental technician support position, including additional job duties, revised job description, title change to zoning and solid waste technician, and grade change from a 5 minimum starting wage of $18.46 to a 7 of a starting wage of $20.74 per hour. The current job incumbent Joy Hicks will receive a pay increase from $22.45 per hour to $23.40 per hour effective July 1st, 2020. Her anniversary date will remain the same. And we approved the newly created zoning and solid waste support specialist position, which is a AFSCME Road and Bridge contract grade 4, starting wage of $17.41 per hour, and along with the proposed job description. And Mr. Chair, I will move that.
Chafee, second.
Okay, we got a motion by Ludwig, second by Chafee. Is there any discussion, questions? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
District 4, Commissioner Mickrod.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes?
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
Okay. Performance Management Program Participation.
Mr. Chair, this is County Auditor Treasurer Kelly Schroeder. We'll take that. And so before you have Resolution 2020-35, which just authorizes us to continue to participate in this program. And it is a program that I was made aware of last year. It's through the State Auditor's Office. They had developed a performance measurement program back in 2010 through the local council, or the Council on Local Results and Innovation. And by participating in that program, you look at 10 different measures of the county. And so that was included in the packet, but I will also put it up on the screen here so you can see it. Of the measures that we looked at, and because we participated last year, we can compare where we were last year in 2018 to where we ended up in 2019. I'm hoping you all can see that. Yes?
Yes.
Kelly, we can see that.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. So we look at these different measures. So the program has 27 different areas that you can look at for a county. You only have to pick 10 of them. So these are the 10 that we used last year and we're using again this year. And so you can kind of go down the list. You have to pick at least one thing from each category. So you can see like public safety, public work, public health. We had to pick something from each category. And so we just compare from last year to this year. And it's something that it's just going to give us a lot of information over the years of participating in it. Kind of some things that I found kind of as highlights. So like public works, average bridge sufficiency went up. I know we had some bridge replacements. Mark's chair's empty, so he can't really talk to that right now. But we had a bridge replacement that I'm assuming helped out with that. Same with as you kind of go down the list, like elections, the accuracy of the post-election auditor review. So that went up. The percentage of veterans receiving federal benefits, I was kind of excited to see that went up. I mean, it didn't go up huge, but it went up some. And so you can kind of see too, the changes over the years. By participating in this program, we're accumulating this information over the years to be able to see how we're doing. And then we also do get a little bit additional local or county program aid for participating. So we get about $4,000 additional for participating in this program. And And in the end, I mean, it probably only took me a couple hours to pull it together, so it sure seems worth it. Questions on that?
I like it, Kelly. I think we should probably, I don't know how we publish that more, get a graph so it's easily understood, but you know, we do track the important sectors of what we do, and we're always seeking improvement, and that's the whole idea of this thing.
Right, absolutely. And so we, as part of the program, you do have the requirement to publish it and put it out to the public. So there is a section on the auditor page of the county website that goes through the program, and our results are there. But it's definitely something we can find other ways to talk about too.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ludwig. So Kelly, do we have to do this resolution every year then?
Correct, yes. So you have to do the resolution to participate every year, and the resolution also commits to publishing the data, which, I mean, you can publish it just at a public meeting or on the county website. So now we're doing both. You could put it in the newspaper too, but that's expensive. So this seems like the best route to talk about it at this public meeting and then put it on the website. And so you do have the resolution before you this morning too.
So
Thank you.
We will need a motion for this resolution 2020-35.
Ludwig will move it. Oh,
Ludwig moves.
I'll second.
More seconds. Any discussion? Questions? Clerk will call the roll.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
And now we'll move on to the election overview.
So, Mr. Chair, this is County Auditor Treasurer Kelly Schroeder again. So I have a PowerPoint I'm going to put up here, and then we'll kind of go through it. So I think that you guys can all see that now. Wave or something
Yes,
if you
we can.
Okay, super. So we are in 2020, and so I think that everybody knows we have an election this year. But I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of the election process and where we're at. So moving on, in 2020, we have 3 elections, one of which we've already completed. So on March 3rd, there was the presidential nomination primary. And so that was a unique experience in Minnesota, where citizens had to actually declare what party ballot they wanted. And it was a little bit of a painful process for some voters in Pine County and across the state because they weren't understanding that. Hearing from the Secretary of State and the legislature, they are thinking that this is going to be here to stay, which is interesting to me because it was a very expensive process. But we'll see. We've got 4 years to see if it's really going to stay. And then coming up, we've got the August 11th primary election, and then of course the November 3rd general election. We'll dig into those a little bit more here. The August primary election, we actually already have ballots for those, and so in front of you, you have Pine County sample ballots. There's only 2 offices that are on the primary election, so the U.S. Senator and the U.S. Representative are the only offices that are included on that ballot. You only end up with primaries when there is at least double the amount of candidates for an office. So if you're voting for one, if there is at least 4 candidates, then so you would end up with a primary election. One question as you're looking at this, you might think, oh, but when you look at that first side of the ballot, you've only got one person on each of those for the Legal Marijuana Now party and the Grassroots Legal Cannabis party. And those, so statute requires if an office is on the ballot, no matter what party it is, if it's a major political party, it also has to be on the ballot. So those are a little goofy, especially because they're on the ballot, but yet there's only one person there. And so that's, hopefully it's not going to be overly confusing to voters. They can only vote in one party here. So they need to pick their side and pick their column and stay in that column. Otherwise their ballot won't be counted. Questions with that at all? Okay, we'll move on. Then we have the November general election. And so many of these offices already had their filing that ended on June 2nd. So everything in the first column on the left was already needed to be filed for by June 2nd, all the way up to the SWCD supervisors had to be filed by June 2nd. And so those, we already know who's running for those offices, and so those will be on the general election. For the hospital districts, the city offices, and then those townships that have elected to have a November election, those have the later filing period that starts the end of July and then runs through August 11th. And so we'll see as we get closer to see who's running for those seats. And so it's a little bit of a process for that November election to pull together. Any questions on that? All right, we'll continue on. One thing this year with COVID, there was a lot of discussion about the voting process and how to make it a more safe process health-wise for folks. And I heard a lot of things on the news, a lot of things out in social media about voter fraud and how those things happen. So there's a lot I wanted to just touch on how Minnesota's system works. It's really interesting to me that every state has a different election system. And so things that state just can't happen in Minnesota or another state because of the processes we have in place. So the first step of voting is obviously to register to vote. There's several ways to register to vote. The first one is a paper application. So we've got them in our office. A lot of different places just mail them out to people. Those paper applications would come back to our office. And then we would process them. There's an online application. I've got the link there, but we don't need to click on it or anything. And so that online application is a little, we like to see people use that because then we don't have to enter the data from the paper application. But some people aren't comfortable with that as well. And then in Minnesota, we also do allow people to register on election day, which is something unique to Minnesota, and a lot of states don't allow. And so that it's the same process as the paper application. It's just that you're doing it on election day. Who can vote? And so this is something that we get a lot of questions on. So obviously you have to be a US citizen to be able to vote. You have to have a social security number or a driver's license generally, or like a Minnesota ID card to be able to vote. And so to be able to get one of those, you need to be a US citizen. You have to be 18 years old on election day. And so if your birthday, if you've got somebody who's turning 18 in September of this year, for example, they would not be able to vote in the primary election, but would be able to vote in the November general election. And then in Minnesota, you have to be a resident here for at least 20 days. And so there are still ways to, if you don't have a Minnesota driver's license, you can, because you just moved here, you can still get registered to vote with like a Wisconsin driver's license and then a piece of mail showing that you now reside here. And then you also cannot be under a felony sentence. And so that means just because you've been convicted of a felony, that doesn't mean you've lost your voting rights if you parts of your sentence. So you've completed your probation and all of that. If it's in the past, you can now vote. And then also people under guardianship can also actually still vote as long as a judge has not removed their voting rights. And so Minnesota is we want to give people the opportunity to vote that we can. But as the next slide shows, we are also very careful about it. And so when people register to vote, they have to provide proof of their name and address. So that is a lot of times some sort of photo ID, and then possibly like a utility bill or like a tuition statement for college students. There's a lot, I mean, there's a huge list of different things that you can show to be able to register to vote. And then once you register to vote, actually the state system checks that information against the driver's license and social security databases to make sure the information matches those databases. It also checks against the Department of Health deceased records. You hear that a lot out on social media and things of, oh, my dead grandpa voted in the last election. Well, in Minnesota, that can't happen. Because our voting records are checked against the Department of Health deceased records. And then we also monthly get a report from the Department of Corrections to make sure that felons are not voting. And so that's something that we go through every month and make sure that we flag anybody who has a new felony conviction. And then we also have to take some folks off who have completed their felony sentences. And then along with all of those things, then also additionally, once someone is registered to vote, they get a postcard verification that's mailed to their registered address as a double check. So if we mail those cards out and we get it back, your registration is then not completed. So it's very hard for someone to fraudulently register to vote in Minnesota because we have all those checks in place. And then the very last step, a postcard's going to be mailed, and if the post office can't deliver it because that's not a correct address, you don't live there, your mail's being forwarded, we'll get it returned, and then your registration wouldn't be processed. Any questions with that registration piece? All right, we'll move on.
Kelly?
Yeah.
My question is about people that don't live all year long, and let's say they go to Texas in the end of October. Then they can vote early, correct?
Correct. Yep. And we're going to go through that process.
Okay,
here.
I'll wait. Yep.
Here we go, Steve.
All right.
Here are the options on how people can vote. So in Minnesota through 2016, we had what was called absentee voting. So you had to have a reason that you needed to vote absentee. You were going to be absent from the polling place. And then in 2016, we switched to actually early voting so that it's just no excuse absentee. Anyone can go vote early up to 46 days before the election. In Pine County, we also have mail ballot districts, which are pretty prevalent, and we'll go through that. But ballots are actually just automatically mailed to all registered voters. And then, of course, you also can vote in person on election day at polling places. So dig into those kind of options. So the early voting or the old, what was called the absentee process. You no longer need an excuse to be able to vote early in Minnesota. There is an application you have to complete to request a ballot. And so there's two ways to do that. There's a paper application, so folks can call our office, we can mail it out. This year, a lot of people maybe are getting these envelopes in the mail from different organizations. This one's from the Center of Voter Information, and it includes an absentee ballot. An early voting application. And so these applications, the paper applications, get completed and mailed back to our office. We are getting inundated phone calls with people getting these courtesy absentee ballot applications mailed to them, wondering if they're legitimate and why they're getting them. And it comes down to there's these nonprofit organizations that just want to make sure everybody who wants to vote can vote. And so they purchase a registered voter list from the Secretary of State and literally mail the absentee ballot applications out to everyone. There's a envelope included that comes back to our office, so it really is a legitimate thing. But it creates a lot of work for our office because then we get a massive amount of absentee ballot applications, which this year maybe is okay because some of those folks probably shouldn't be going to the polling place. Those paper applications are a lot of work for us though, because then we have to enter all of the information again into the state system. Where the process that we prefer is the online application. And so I've got the link up here, but you literally click on it and you put in your name and address and your driver's license number, and that's going right into the state system, and then we can process it from there. So it takes a step away from us, and so we like that route. And so once those applications are submitted to our office, then we begin to process them. I already mentioned, but I'll go over it again. You can vote early or vote absentee 46 days before an election. So for the primary election, the August 11th primary election, that begins June 26th. So that's already next Friday. So we are gearing up in major election mode in my office. And then for the general election, that starts September 18th, the 46 days. And so absentee or early voting is very similar actually to mail balloting. The process is very similar. The only difference for mail balloting, which is my last bullet point, is that you don't have to complete that application if you're in a mail ballot district. If you're registered to vote at least 21 days before the election, we just automatically mail you a ballot. In Pine County, we now have 20 of our 47 townships and cities that are actually using this process, which is about 13.8% of the registered voters. So, yep, it's almost half of our jurisdictions, but yet it's a small percentage. And that is because the statute only allows townships and cities under 400 voters to go through that process. Which we really appreciate because it's a lot of work for our office to process those mail ballots and get them mailed out. Folks in mail ballot districts, they can choose to vote in person. However, their polling place is at the courthouse. So for the folks in Nickerson, when they don't want to vote at their kitchen table and they want to come to a polling place, they do have to come to the courthouse. And so we do hear a little bit of people a little unhappy with that, but they can vote at their kitchen table. So I guess if it were my choice, that's what I would choose. So that voting by mail process, so that includes the early voting, the absentee voting, and the mail ballots. So when our office puts those together, they receive one large envelope, and it has this logo, this official election mail logo on it. And the post office requires us to put that on all envelopes that include anything election so that they know to handle them with their proper procedures. In the large envelope that folks will get, included in that is instructions on what to do with everything that's in that envelope. If the person is not registered to vote, they will receive a voter registration application. They'll receive a ballot in there. Envelope, a secrecy envelope, and an I voted sticker. And we'll go through those envelopes here in just a second. And so when people choose to vote by mail, or we have those mail ballot districts, they do get quite the packet, but we intentionally assemble them in a certain way that hopefully walks people through what they need to do. And then of course our phone number is still in there as well if people have questions. And so the first thing that folks need to do is fill out this signature envelope. And when they get it, it already has a sticker on it like I'm showing on the screen that has the voter's name and address on it. The voter then needs to insert either their driver's license number, their Minnesota ID card, or their last four of their social security number. And then the voter needs to sign it at the X. And then this is the place that people get a little tripped up on. They have to have someone witness their ballot. So that witness has to look at the ballot first to make sure that it's blank before they vote, to make sure that there's not fraud or anything going on. And then once that voter marks the ballot in private, the voter will put it in the secrecy envelope, which is the tan envelope that's included, and they'll seal it in there. And then on the signature envelope, that witness will actually complete their name, their address, and then sign that they witnessed that person. The person whose name is on the envelope, they witnessed them, that they had a blank ballot, they completed it, put it in the signature, the secrecy envelope, and then they are signing off that they witnessed that. That is a little bit of a place that trips some folks up because some folks live on their own and they don't have someone to witness because it's fine for spouses to witness. The person does have to be registered to vote in Minnesota if they're witnessing, they have to be a notary generally. So like we've got some people who winter down in southern states, and so they find somebody there that's also from Minnesota, or they just go to a notary at a local bank and have them do it. We've got some older people too in some of our outlying areas that struggle a little bit with this, but we work with our townships and things to make sure that we are able to find them someone to be able to witness. When these ballots, and so this is actually the envelope that also, when it gets mailed to them, it has postage on it. So this is the envelope and like our address to return it back to us. And so this is the envelope that comes back to us with everything inside. And then when folks mail it back to us, another question or another thing that you saw on social media is that, oh, my ballot didn't even get counted because it was left at the post office. Well, in Minnesota, we have a neat track your ballot tool. And so it kind of almost works like if you've ever tracked a package through the post office or anything like that. So you literally can follow it from the point that you submit your application for the ballot, and it says, okay, the county's received your application. Oh, the county has processed your application. Oh, the county mailed your ballot this day. And so really we've got a lot of safeguards in place in Minnesota for people to be able to know if their ballot has come back to the county's office. And so there are requirements for when those ballots need to be back to the county office to be able to be counted on election day. They do have to be back by election day. And so that was something like with our special elections we had last year, we struggled a little bit with because those time frames were so short. People really struggled to be able to mail them back to us fast enough and have us receive them by election day. When we receive those ballots back, the absentee ballot board reviews envelopes to make sure that they're completed properly. So we're looking to make sure that there's an ID number or driver's license number put in there. The voter has signed and that they've had a witness and the witness has completed everything correctly. At the point that there's two people that serve on that absentee ballot board, two people look at the envelope and decide whether it's acceptable or not. If it's accepted, great, it goes into the ballot box to be weighted to be counted on election day. If it's rejected, then our procedure is to try to contact that voter to explain to them what the problem is. Sometimes it's a super easy problem in that we just can't read their witness name and they can just tell it to us over the phone, and then, oh yeah, we can make out now that we know that it's John Smith, we now know, we can understand that it's John Smith. Otherwise, sometimes we just need to talk the voter through it and send them a replacement ballot. And we, by statute, have to send them replacement ballots. If there's an issue with their ballot, we have to send them a replacement ballot up to 5 days before the election day. So we really do all of our best to make sure everybody who's voting by mail, their votes get counted. And those ballots are processed right at the courthouse. So that previously was an issue of those absentee ballots. They were sent out to the polling places to be counted. And that's when you had issues with so-and-so forgot the absentee ballots in their trunk and they were never counted. And so those ballots now, once they're received at the courthouse, they do not leave the courthouse and they're all processed right there. Any questions with all of that? All right, we'll continue on. So for those folks that go to the polling place to vote on election day, they're greeted by several people working at the polling places. which those folks are called election judges. And there are several different stations of election judges. I've got them listed here. So we've got a head judge, a registration judge, a roster judge, a ballot judge, and then a tabulator judge. In Pine County, most of our polling places only are required to have 3 or 4 judges. So you're not going to see 5 different election judges generally working in your polling place. It might probably be only 3 or 4, and so some of these folks are doubling up on their duties. Election judges are something that we're always in short supply of. It's a good public service to do. So if you know somebody who is available and is willing to serve, it's definitely something that we need more people to serve doing. It's a 3-hour training the end of July, and then you'd work on the primary election day or the general election day, and you are paid by the townships and cities to serve. State statute also requires employers to allow you to have time off work to serve as an election judge. And so it's something that we want to make sure people know we need more election judges, and it's not hard to be an election judge. So make sure to reach out to me if you know of somebody, because we can definitely use you. And then when someone goes to vote in person on election day, if they're registered to vote in that precinct at their address, they don't need to show any ID. They just need to have their name and address. And then that election judge will find them on what's called the roster, which I'm showing a sample roster below. And so that election judge will find them on the roster and verify their address, and then have the voter sign next to their name, certifying that they are themselves and that they are able to vote in Minnesota. If they're not registered to vote, then they need to be registered to vote, and so then they go through the voter registration process that same day. And so we'll move on from that. In Minnesota, a lot of you maybe have seen these in your polling places. They're called AutoMark machines. This was a requirement in 2006. Well, for the 2006 election cycle, these had to be in every polling place in Minnesota. And so they're assisted voting devices. And so you insert your ballot in there, and then you can see the headphones in the picture. It can read the ballot to you in case you have trouble seeing. It enlarges the ballot so that for those that have trouble, it has a lot of different features. It's got some contrast features to make the ballot easier to see. And what it does, it simply marks the ballot for the person. So once they put the ballot in there, they make their choices. It actually fills in the ovals for the person and then prints it back out for them. And so these machines are getting rather outdated. And so now that we've had the same machine since 2006, so they're 14 years old. And technology that's 14 years old maybe doesn't always work the best. And so it's something that I have on my radar to start to think about, how do we start to replace these machines, because we are required to have them in the polling places, and the ones that we have are outdated. So that's something that we're going to keep tabs on. There are some grant funds available to start to help to replace those, but they only cover half the cost. And each machine is about $5,000 to $6,000. So that is a lot of money when you start to talk about, we've got 27 polling places in Pine County. So that's something we'll work on over the next couple years, though. Also, in most polling places, you'll see a vote tabulator, which looks like on the screen. These are called M100 tabulators. So everyone who votes, they will go insert their ballot into this tabulator, and their vote will be counted. Some jurisdictions, like for the primary election, we do still have 6 jurisdictions that are pretty small that still hand count their ballots. They can hand count those really fast. versus these vote tabulators are again about $5,000 to $6,000 each. And then you've got maintenance on them annually, and you've got programming for each election. So some of those smaller jurisdictions still do just hand count. But if a precinct has more than 500 registered voters, they're actually required to use a tabulator. And then at the end of the night, the election judges actually close out the polls on this machine, and it prints out, it almost looks like a cash register receipt of all the vote totals. And we'll go through kind of at the end. We do some spot checking to ensure that those ballots were counted correctly by the equipment. At 8 p.m. everywhere across the state of Minnesota, the polls close. Anyone in line at 8 p.m. can vote. So that's something important to know. If you get there at 7:59 and the line's really long, and you can't get through the line by 8 p.m., that's okay. You were in line at before 8 p.m., you get to vote. And as I mentioned, when we were talking about the tabulator, the results are tabulated at each precinct and polling place, and then they're brought into the auditor's office where they're uploaded and entered into the state system. Some jurisdictions, like down in the cities and things, they actually electronically transfer their results to the county, and that's not something that we are set up to do with all the different security features and things like that. And so our election judges physically bring the results into the county, and we upload them from the county office. One fun tidbit is that by state statute, the county auditor cannot leave the courthouse until all the results are reported. So that's a little bit fun because we've had a few townships in the past, like the 2018 election. We had one clerk who went home to take a nap before coming, and Kathy ended up calling her and waking her up at about 2 a.m. and telling her that she needed to come. And so that's always an interesting part of the evening, is to see when you can get out of there. And then after the election, I think a lot of you have had the opportunity to serve on the canvassing board. And so within 2 to 3 days after the election, the canvassing board meets, and what they do is they review the results that were input into the state system against the results that were reported by the townships and cities. And so that process is used to certify the results, to make sure the results were accurately input to the state system. So that's one part of the post-election activities. The next part is called the post-election review. And so we manually have to recount 2 precincts for the offices that are listed on the screen. And so that's just a double check of the tabulators to make sure on those precincts there wasn't anything that would have resulted in a change of votes. There are sometimes automatic recounts that are triggered when there's less than like 0.25% or something crazy, a tiny small percent of difference in votes. There are recounts then that have to happen for those entire races. So it's not just that you're looking at Pekega Township presidential race, you'd be looking at the presidential race for every single township and city in Pine County. So that's a recount that's very different than the post-election review, because the post-election review, you're just looking at 2 precincts and those specific races. And then once we get through those 2 processes and then a recount, if we end up in that situation, we have to store all election materials for 22 months because there could be contest periods. The state auditor's office also does some audits to make sure that we've accurately processed everything. And so we end up with a lot of storage room of these materials because we have to keep all of the ballots and all of the materials from all of those polling places for that 22 months. And so that's something that we're working through in our office, and actually Pete and Brock just made us a nice storage place for all of that stuff. Other than that, I think we made it through the election process. Are there questions from anyone that came up as we're going into this election season this year?
Took me a while to find the unmute button. I thank you, Kelly. I'm always amazed that I don't know if it's paranoia that takes place on social media about all the voter fraud that happens, because I do not see how it can happen where I vote, and I've been on that committee that looks at the total county, and I just don't understand where they think people can cheat.
Right. Yeah, last summer, Secretary Simon was actually I think it was last summer, was at Pine Tech, and somebody had asked him about it. And he said in the last 20 years in Minnesota, they've had 7 cases of voter fraud. So it's not something that happens in Minnesota.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? We will move on to the Nemadji One Watershed, One Plan summary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Melanie Beaumier from the Carleton Soil and Water Conservation District. And I'm going to present, actually I can start doing that right now, a presentation about our One Watershed One Plan. Let's get that started.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Anxious to hear.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me time on your busy agenda today. So I will try to go through this somewhat fast. I have a tendency to talk fast anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. But please feel free to interrupt me. If you have questions, I'll try to make sure I ask them. But just know that that's the case. And I also want to point out that the plan is in the draft form right now. We are accepting comments through the end of the month as an internal review. So if you have comments, if you have time to look through the plan, we are accepting those comments. And in July, we'll be asking you that once you have a chance to look at the plan to make a motion for us to proceed with the formal 60-day review that's required for moving the plan forward. So we just want to make sure we gave you time to actually look at it before you made a motion on that. I know Pine County is farther along than Carleton County as far as One Watershed One Plan, so you guys are more likely familiar with this. But just an overview of what One Watershed One Plan is. It's a voluntary program and plan that aligns water planning along watershed boundaries versus county boundaries. And it enhances the existing county water plans, but it's still local priorities, it's still locally driven. It uses existing authorities and funding mechanisms. It's not adding any new ordinances or rules, but it's based on that current state data and information that we've been collecting over the last 10 or so years. Progress will be monitored and tracked for achieving our measurable goals, which I'll go over in this presentation. And then the biggest thing about this is once it's adopted, we'll be eligible for implementation funding that's non-competitive. So most of the projects that we do for water resources are through competitive grants, and this will give us a chance to have some non-competitive dollars to do this work. I know maybe some of you are just familiar with the Nemadji. It's a smaller part of Pine County, so I'll give you a little overview of the watershed itself. The headwaters of several of our streams are in northeastern Pine County, and then it's the southeastern part of Carleton County. What's really known for is the red clay soils that are prone to slumping and erosion. And also it has really flashy streams and steep banks. Most of that's on the Carleton County side. It's also known for abundant forests, which you're probably familiar with the Nemadji State Forest. And wetlands, but in Carleton County, we also have a diversity of farms. We have CSAs and beef, pork, dairy. There's just a lot of diverse farms in that part of our county. Both Carleton and Pine County are involved in this watershed. Of course, then it crosses over to Wisconsin and Douglas County, and the Nemadji River empties into Lake Superior in Superior, Wisconsin. Some of the interesting things about the watershed is that it has a ton of trout streams on the Carleton County side that are registered by DNR, but then there are also some really high quality trout streams that anglers use. And we also have several wild rice lakes. With all these good things, there are some issues. Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has listed several of the streams as impaired because they have too much sediment in them, which isn't a surprise based on the erosion that we have on those stream banks. And with that soil erosion, we have some phosphorus in some of these streams. We also have E. coli impairments and one lake impairment that's on the border of Carleton and Pine counties, Net Lake. So it's a lot of good things and some issues. As you know, this planning effort was started through a memorandum of agreement between Carleton and Pine counties and SWCDs. That was about a little over a year ago. And just some highlights of the plan itself, what maybe makes it different from other planning efforts. First of all, we realized early on that, we're really excited to be getting some non-competitive implementation dollars for this project, but we realized that because it's a small watershed and their funding mechanisms are based on the amount of land, the number of acres of private land, we weren't going to be getting a ton of funding. So we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out where we could get the most benefits for each project. Also, what was interesting about our One Watershed One plan is that we collaborated with Wisconsin because obviously they're about half of the watershed. So we had on our advisory committee a City of Superior employee, and also we used a tool that was developed by Wisconsin DNR that we were very thankful to have that helped us do prioritization and target where we would work. They had a grant and then they included Minnesota when they did that. We also did a lot of collaboration with road authorities. In this watershed, we just have a lot of opportunities and problems with the roads and the streams, the road stream interface. So we worked with the transportation departments, MnDOT, and townships where we have these problems. This plan includes groundwater goals, and this was something that we were sort of surprised that it would be as an important a topic as it was, just because we haven't really thought about groundwater as much as maybe we should have been. So that was an interesting thing. And then finally, the draft plan was completed within a year. So we were really excited that there was a big push, thanks to a lot of time put in by our advisory committee and our policy committee. We were able to get this done in a timely manner, so we really appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how this plan is set up. So if you have time to go through the plan, it is set up in topic areas, which may be different than other watershed plans that you have looked at. We started our kickoff bus tour mid-July of last year, and we visited different sites based on topic, and it just sort of flowed. That's the way we would set up the plan. So our topic areas in the plan are streams, wetlands, forest, farms, groundwater, and lakes. And I'm going to go through a little bit of each of these topics, highlight what's in the plan. And I'm just giving the, just a small part of what's in the plan. So if you want to know more, you certainly feel free to ask questions, or there's a lot more in the plan than what I'll be saying today. Okay, so for our first topic, our goal is to reconnect 46 miles of stream to benefit aquatic life, improve the road stream interface, and reduce sediment. So I mentioned that we have this sediment issue in the Nemadji, and a lot of people will probably say, well, what do roads have to do with sediment erosion? Well, we have had, as Pine County has had, a lot of big rain events in the last 10 years or so. So we've had a 200-year rain event in 2012, 16, 18, and 19. When that happens, we lose roads in the Nemadji. And so one 200-year rain event results in 600 tons of sediment in our streams. So fixing our road issues will help improve our streams. So the actions associated with this goal is we're going to replace undersized perch to misaligned culverts, and we're relying heavily on our road authorities to do that work. In this watershed, we also have some legacy dams that were built, and actually they were built to improve water quality. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we would like to remove those where we can because they pose a big risk to sediment erosion in our watersheds. We also recognize that there's a lot of road gravel that gets washed into streams in these steep slopes. So if we can stabilize that, we can save a lot of sediment in our streams. And we have a lot of unstable stream banks throughout the watershed. We could do work in many places, but we're going to focus where we can secure infrastructure in this case. So our outcomes that we hope to achieve by this is to improve public safety, reduce sediment erosion to our streams and eventually to Lake Superior, improve habitat for fish and aquatic life, protection of commerce because we need to be able to get around if we want to do business. And we're going to mitigate climate change impacts since we have these big rain events coming more frequently. We'll be able to deal with that better if we have properly sized culverts. For wetlands, so we have a goal of increasing storage in our watershed by about 1,100 acre feet. And that is worded that way because it's a requirement for the plan through the Board of Water and Soil Resources. So when I think of storage, I don't think of acre feet. What is that? Well, it's about a football field covered in 1 foot of water. So our goal is to increase watershed storage by restoring wetlands. And why do we want more watershed storage? Well, unfortunately, most of us are probably have heard the flatten the curve because of the pandemic, but it actually works really well at explaining why we want more watershed storage. So, in a normal flood event right now in the Nemadji, all that water comes at once, it hits those streams and it washes out infrastructure because we have so much of it, it's so flashy. But if we can hold that water in the landscape longer, we can reduce those flood impacts to our infrastructure. And so that's basically what we're trying to do. Now, I mentioned a moment ago about these red clay dams. In the 1970s, their idea to do this was to install these dams on streams to hold that water back. And while that worked, it left this legacy of maintenance that isn't sustainable for our district. And so why we chose wetlands as a way to increase that storage is that it requires a lot less long-term maintenance that we will have to deal with in the future. We don't want to leave that for the people who come after us. That's our wetland goal. And so the outcomes that we hope to achieve by this is to protect vulnerable infrastructure. I actually didn't mention that, but where we want to restore these wetlands would be upstream of vulnerable infrastructure. Specifically, we're looking at, for example, we're looking at County Road 8, which is an east-west road in the watershed. It has many culverts to blow out because basically it's acting as a barrier for water trying to flow north to Lake Superior. So if we can hold more water back from that road, then we can help protect that infrastructure. Again, mitigating climate change impacts and reducing sediment erosion. Most of the erosion that's happening in the Nemadji, the vast majority of that erosion is coming from in the channel. It's not washing off construction sites or farm fields. It's eroding in the channel itself. So if we can slow the flow of water, we will reduce those impacts because we have the most channel erosion during high flow events. The other side, we've been talking a lot about rain, but we also have, like we're having right now, we have drought. And if we can keep some storage on the landscape, that will help support those streams that have low flow during these periods. A lot of our streams right now are dry or close to dry, and that obviously affects habitat for the fish and bugs that are trying to live there. Our forest goal is to increase our forest management by about a little over 5,500 acres. And we want to increase forest stewardship plan by about 88 forest stewardship plans. And our target is going to be in areas where those forests are helping to reduce peak flows and protect drinking water. So there's a little graphic there just explaining what a forest stewardship plan is. And basically it's preparing a private or professional forester with a private landowner. And it helps them determine what objectives they have for their forest land and make sure that they are able to get their objectives met and also protect water quality and looking at the bigger picture. So of course we're talking about planning, but our goal is to actually have actions in that plan. So they do things to help improve forest health, which will in turn help us reduce peak flows and protect our drinking water supplies. So our outcomes with forestry is to, obviously, I just mentioned, protect drinking water and maintain that reduced peak flow because forests help us do both those things. We also want to support our wood products industry, and obviously it's in part of our economy. And we know that there's a lot of species that require young forests to survive. So, logging is an important tool in maintaining forest health. And by doing some of these projects, we'll also be improving forest habitat for a variety of species. For our farm goal, we want to increase lands enhanced by best management practices by about 4,400 acres. And what does that mean? Because many people aren't familiar with best management practices. Well, that includes, keeping livestock off streams, improving feedlot runoff, improving soil health, and all these things. We obviously, I mentioned that we have a really diverse farm economy in the watershed. We really value that, so we want to do that. We want them to remain there and remain productive while also protecting our water quality. So the outcomes that we hope to achieve by this is to reduce phosphorus and sediment into our impaired streams and Lake Superior, protect our drinking water, increase storage. Just like I mentioned before, that storage is going to help with our streams, and we'll do this by improving soil health, and preserve our farming community by increasing farm productivity while protecting water quality. Our groundwater goal, we are focusing on sealing unused wells. The unused wells can be a direct source of contamination to our drinking water supply, so obviously we want those sealed to protect that. Most residents in the watershed rely on private wells. So the first step is we don't know where all these unsealed wells are, so we need to learn the location of those, and we plan to do that with outreach to our people living in the watershed. And once we find out where they are, we can seal those. We're very interested in pursuing a drinking water testing program for the watershed, because there are some sensitive areas, sandier soils, which are more prone to having pollutants get into the drinking water supply. So we want to learn more about how that water supply is. And the other additional thing is that we wanted to start discussions on a county-wide point of sale septic inspection in Carleton County. Pine County, you already are doing this, and we don't do that in Carleton County yet. And we thought it would be worthwhile to discuss that and maybe lean a little bit on Pine County's experiences of how that could work. So in our outcome for the groundwater goal is to protect our drinking water supply. That's our main goal. There aren't many lakes in the watershed, but there are a few, and one lake we share with Pine County. And so our goal with our lakes is to enhance those priority lakes, which Net Lake is one of them, by reducing phosphorus by 5% and restoring 5% of shoreline parcels. So why do we care about phosphorus? Well, phosphorus in the lake, 1 pound of phosphorus equals 500 pounds of algae. And algae in a lake makes it less fishable and swimmable, so we want to keep those lakes as nice as we can. So our actions would include restoring shorelines, increasing stormwater practices such as rain gardens, and we also want to develop individual lake management plans to target the work. So if we know that the work we're doing is going to make a difference to those lakes, and Net Lake is one of those lakes that we want to have a lake management plan for. Our outcomes are to keep our lakes fishable and swimmable. We also want to protect those lakes. Net Lake isn't listed as a DNR wild rice lake, but it is listed under the 1854 Treaty Authority. So there's a potential to have wild rice there. Also, we want to improve the lake visual aesthetics and increase and maintain our property values. Our nice clear lakes are going to be worth more than ones that are full of algae. Our final topic that we wrapped everything up in was our protection goal. And what I want to make sure everyone understands when we talk about protection is that it doesn't mean preservation. We recognize our lands are working lands in this part of the county, and we are in this part of the state. And we also recognize that that's an important way that we keep those resources healthy. But we wanted to call out protection because we realized a lot of our topics had protection in the discussion. So first I'll just talk about where we want to do that. We're talking about sensitive areas for habitat, our lakes we want to protect, water quality, some of these cold water springs that provide water to our trout species, some of our forests and obviously we want to protect our drinking water supply. So there's a few different ways you can protect land. Our main action in our plan is to increase our the Sustainable Forest Incentives Act, which is a land covenant that private landowners can have, that they agree they will not develop their land for a certain period of time. I believe it's 8 to 50 years that they agree to, and then they get an incentive for doing that. That's mostly where we are focused right now. Other things that you can do to protect land is you can have conservation easements. And where we see that being a tool that might be used is where if you're going to invest thousands of dollars into a restoration project, it makes sense to permanently protect that investment on the property. Finally, another tool you use is land acquisitions. That could be by public ownership. But we don't anticipate doing any land acquisitions as part of this plan. We add the advisory committee asked me to add an action in the plan to talk about it if there's places that we think it should be done. But we also realize that our tax rules are really important to our counties, and we don't necessarily want to take land off those tax rolls. So there's action to look at it, but there's no action to acquire any land at this point. Our outcomes for protection is to protect our trout and other cold water species and our wild rice resource. This keeps coming up, but we want to reduce peak flows and protect water quality in our lakes and streams, protect our drinking water supply, and maintain habitat for sensitive species. Okay, now for the fun part, the money part. If you go through the plan, you will see this table and this color scheme in several places. What it's describing is where different funding is going to come from to fund this plan. So we have a baseline level, which is our current funding sources, the watershed-based implementation funding, which is what we hope to receive from the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And then our other funding sources include funding from our partners and competitive grants. Our plan is a little bit different because we are doing a lot with that road stream interface. And so in our baseline funding, we are including county state aid dollars that are going to be used in the watershed, township bridge funds, county road tax. So that number is going to look probably bigger than you may have maybe used to seeing. And the other sources also include some federal money coming for road projects. So let's look at those numbers. As I said, they look kind of big, because at least they look big to me, because I'm not used to looking at my project numbers are usually a lot smaller than this. So for our baseline, we're looking about $10 million over the next 10 years. And that, like I said, that's mostly coming for road projects. We all know how expensive those are. We're hoping for just under $2 million from the watershed-based implementation funds. We'll see whether we get that or not. That's sort of up in the air, but that's what we're hoping to receive. And then the other sources, those grants, partner funding, different cost shares, that's $15 million. So the total 10-year budget for the Nemadji watershed is about $28 million. That's a pretty big number in my mind. As far as where those watershed-based implementation funds are going, about a quarter is going into wetlands and stream work. Obviously, we're going to be spending a lot more money on streams, but a lot of that is coming from other sources, so it won't come from this watershed-based implementation funds. We can't do very much with the money. We'll be, most road projects are well over $200,000, so we realize that there's limitations on what we can spend there, but there's still some work we can do. A large portion right now out of our plan funds are going to go to agriculture, and there's a lot of gaps in there are funds to get conservation in the ground, but we see a lot of gaps as far as technical assistance and engineering assistance. So if we can get some more funds to do that work, we can get more conservation on the ground. So that's why that number is a little bit higher. There's really good funding sources available for forestry work through DNR cost share and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and obviously lakes and protection and groundwater, those are important, but we have a little bit less expensive projects to do, a little less of a priority on those. Plan administration, after we get through this whole process and get the grant or get the plan approved on the Board of Water and Soil Resources, We plan to administer the grant funds that we will receive through a memorandum of agreement, and that we will develop. We can start developing after we get through the 60-day comment period. But that is how we plan to administer these grant funds, which we thought would work well based on our good relationship with Pine County. So, right, like I mentioned earlier, we are at the internal review process right now. We are going to be asking the boards to approve the 60-day notification of the draft plan in July. Then we have that 60 days where stakeholders can give us their comments. Once we receive those, we will have a public hearing, and who knows what that's going to look like in October. Maybe we'll be able to get together by then, maybe not. Our goal is to have the Regional Board of Water and Soil Resource review in December with the full board approval also in December. And then we hope to receive funds in early 2021 so that we can start getting projects on the ground next summer during construction season. So that's what I have. I know I went pretty fast, but I don't know if you have questions now. I'm always willing to take questions by email or phone, and also please feel free to provide any comments you have to the planning effort.
Thank you very much. I do have a question, and that's about the well sealing.
Yes.
Do you have a program that would help if a person had a well on their place that was discovered? I think sometimes there's a hesitancy to for some people to say anything because they know it's expensive.
Right.
And so do you have a plan to help with that?
Yeah, so there is funding. They would be eligible through the Ag BMP loan program, which is a loan. Depending on where the well is, if it's rural, Natural Resources Conservation Service helps seal wells as well. So it sort of depends. Right now, it's hard to know the scope of the need for well sealing. If we thought that there was a need for it, we could use watershed-based implementation funds for this. But right now, we don't really know what that scope is, so it was hard to devote a lot of money to it. Our first goal will be to figure out what that number is, and then if we need to in the 5-year update for this plan, we could divert funds to do some of that work as well.
I just know, years ago they were trying to do a abandoned well study in our neighborhood, and people were very reluctant to give up the location of a well because they were convinced in their mind that it was going to cost them thousands of dollars to seal it if somebody found out about it.
Right.
Which turned out to be the opposite of what they were really trying to get at, is just find out how many wells there were so they knew what kind of budget to build. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know. It might be, we might need to somehow make it anonymous so people can right. Tell us without having to tell us where it is.
Right. And then my other question is, the state, Nemadji State Forest, the state owns a lot of land. Have they been at the table participating in this plan?
So they were we had specific topic meetings through the process, and DNR Forestry was at the forestry topic meeting. I think they were at the streams and maybe wetlands topic meetings as well. That was in the fall, so my memory's I know for sure they were at the forestry meeting. Okay. So okay. They weren't on the advisory committee, but they provided their input through that specific meeting.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. Any other questions? Matt,
thanks,
you got
Melanie.
anything to add? You're our
delegate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest we take a short break for I've got 11:38, that we come back at 11:43. 5 minutes, guys, folks, and then we'll hear from Terry.
I'm in short break.
Peek out here.
Is everybody back? How you doing, Terry?
Good, thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, I think we're ready for you.
Sounds good.
Terry Fawcett's going to give us an update on the Regional Juvenile Center.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Terry Fawcett, Probation Director here. We had a June 4th Juvenile Center Directors meeting. We didn't have the normal full board meeting. Opted for a directors meeting to discuss, the main topic was to discuss recruitment of non-member counties into the Joint Powers Agreement. The current Joint Powers expires at the end of 2021. Counties specifically to be targeted for recruitment that are using consistent beds at RJC are Benton County, Stearns, Freeborn, and Morrison. Member counties strongly suggested that they need to develop new resources, such as more programming in RJC instead of just being detention focused. Their director, Todd Benjamin, will set up a subsequent sub-ops group meeting to work on this. That group is largely agents and supervisors that would have better pulse on what specific programming would be beneficial for kids there. During that meeting, I brought up a concern that COVID has had on the courts, and specifically with Article 12 of the Joint Powers Agreement, which is an act of God clause. Subsequently, their director, Dylan Workington, looked into the CARES Act funding, and it does not apply to the joint powers. And both him and Todd Benjamin indicated that Anoka County nor RJC would be in a position to bail out counties from a bill at the end of the year. So we'll get to that more in a minute. All 9 member counties were canvassed to see what kind of beds they were looking at in the new joint powers. I just used our one bed for conversation for now. One of the PIC counties was not present there, but I do know what they're at least intending to do. So when you added up what counties were looking to do in the next joint powers, it came up to 21. The current divisor is 24. So even if you recruited some of those new member counties, you still have to pick up 3 beds from losing based on what members talked about at that meeting. So that's a concern. I also shared some concerns that we've had from Becky, the HHS director, and how the decreased revenues in HHS and furloughs of HHS staff impacts, Pine County budget and revenues and how that can be difficult. And when you get that balloon bill at the end of the year, if you're actually underutilizing your beds. We also consulted with the county attorney, Reese Frederickson, who took a look at the joint powers agreement and that clause specifically. He indicated that there is an argument about the act of God clause and would consider pushing it. And that would be topic for conversation probably down the line or later in the year. One of the things that, RJC had indicated is their expenses are down as too. They've furloughed staff, laid off staff, and haven't had as many kids in that facility. So, but we haven't really seen a deep dive into their books. Subsequently, there was an e-meeting and motion on the table, and has been motioned and seconded and approved, I believe, that the current non-member rate of $264 a day to go up to $325 a day first. And so, again, as part of the strategy to encourage those consistent users to become members instead of non-members, member rate currently is $264 a day. Some other topics of note, I think you, Commissioner Hallen and David know, Itasca County just lost their detention center. And so now their closest place to bring a kid for detention will be Bemidji, 90 miles away. And so, I think, and I'm sure Commissioner Ludwig will add some input here shortly, but there's a great value of having a juvenile center as close by as the one we have in Lino Lakes in Anoka County. Without it, we're looking at Bemidji or Duluth if there's a bed space. And, the overall county view of things, to lose that resource would be very difficult, and would be very difficult on a sheriff's budget as well, and sheriff's deputies' times. And so we all express our, the value of the juvenile center, but also expressed our concerns. One of the things that they don't do is the math in the current joint powers agreement is based on the RJC facility only. Myself and some others talked about in the new joint powers, wouldn't it be better to include the 3 different buildings on their campus to include in that, because that has the non-secure programs built into that. But in a subsequent meeting I had with Dylan, those are all currently separate line items and can't be done. And so that makes that more difficult. So we're really looking at our numbers and our divisor based on that 365 days on contracting for that, with limited options for what the programs offer currently. So Dylan, he also is supposed to put together a memo and maybe taking a different look at a separate cost center and just the different ways of looking at budgeting. And so I'm going to stay on him on that because it is something I wouldn't mind having Kelly take a look at and Becky as well as we look into the end of the year. But one of the things that we had talked about before was having a committee of the whole meeting that got canceled due to COVID. The question to the board and to David would be, are we going to possibly take a look at having that remotely? And so, the commissioners that maybe aren't as familiar with the Joint Powers Agreement or with RJC can hear from them directly as well. So with that, I would turn it over for questions or maybe comments from Commissioner Ludwig as well.
Thank you. Matt, you got any comments?
Well, my comments would be the way the program was set up now, and I think I voted for county to move with raising the fee for the non-members. But the way it was just like $20 difference. So why would you be a member and just buy as needed? So that's why there was a lot of counties that are using it, but they're not member counties. And we were getting by all these years because enough juveniles were coming in and they were taking spaces for beds not utilized by other counties, so it would balance out. So it's probably good in some ways that a lot of juveniles aren't going there because, we as Pine County ourselves have started programs where we don't want to do custodial things with juveniles and, put a label on them right away. But we have to realize that I say we try to keep a bed there because when we will need beds for juveniles. And the biggest problem, like Terry spoke to, is the windshield time. If we don't have a bed available, we'll be transporting juveniles to Timbuktu. So I don't know the best, I don't know what, that's a close and easy one for us to access. And so I think it's the best for us now, but I don't know how this is all going to unravel because I think there's going to be counties that just say we're out of here. But we'll see. I don't know the outcome, is what I was going to say.
I've got a question, and I think primarily for Commissioner Ludwig, but Terry, you probably have a perspective as well. And in your presentation, Terry, you made the comment about Anoka not wanting to bail out the counties. And my question relates to what is the relationship of the Joint Powers Board with managing the finances of the facility? And we know that a lot of services have been disrupted. We know in some places there are cost savings, in some places there are increased expenses. Is that Joint Powers Board managing the operation as a way to provide high quality services at the lowest cost? Or is Anoka structuring it so that it's kind of we're the only game in town, so take us, or you can drive to, Bemidji or wherever else? I mean, what's the attitude on the board for a cooperative solution that manages the budget long-term versus the numbers are what the numbers are?
I'll start, Terry, if that's okay. So historically, we have our quarterly meetings down there. And at the end of the year, we always have reserves, capital and the other one, I can't think of it. But anyway, so like last year, I couldn't make that meeting because I was at another meeting, but Terry was there. And we were just going to take what the county owed for non-used beds out of our reserves that were sitting there. And it was going to happen. And then, I don't know, Terry could speak that some discussion started because someone didn't know what was going on. And the vote, I think it was ready. There was a motion and a second. but then it was pulled off. And it ended up, they didn't use the reserves to pay off what the other counties included. So the counties can drive that, or the board can drive that. I don't know I can't speak to that one, but I can speak to the mini before that. We had such a comfortable ratio that, yes, we need to have some reserves because it was camera changes, pre-training and all that stuff was coming at that facility. So I don't, Terry, can you speak to that last one? You don't have to throw anybody on the bus, but there was some confusion to me on that last vote at the end of the year to cover that budget. But typically we would, because nobody had a big bill. But this year the bills, because of lack of use, was different. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I made the motion at that meeting and was seconded by Mille Lacs County, and it appeared that it was going to pass, that we were going to take that from reserves, and it ultimately didn't pass. But to answer your question, David, I think the answer is in the middle, because to kind of what Commissioner Ludwig said a few minutes ago, in my opinion, and some other directors' opinions, RJC's not thinking ahead. They're being reactive, and that's not helpful. And because things have changed in this business. I remember when I started, if a probation officer was mad at a kid on a Friday, he'd lock him up and then kid him out of RJC on Monday. And that's what you did. But that's not what you do with kids. That's not best practices. And that's certainly not what we do in Pine County with our Project Rise work. We try to use detention as little as possible. And as I had in my annual report, we even have a risk assessment that talks about whether or not a kid should go back to the juvenile center after a first appearance. And so everything is evidence-based. And so less kids are spending time there. And even at our directors meeting here on June 4th, Todd Benjamin said, more kids are coming in and they're just spending 24 hours there and they're leaving. And he wanted to chalk that up all to COVID. And it's certainly somewhat COVID related, but it's not entirely. That is how people do business with children these days, is to get them out in their communities and do community programming. And so, and when the bigger counties and the joint powers speak loudly, that causes concern. And, Wright County, Washington County, and Sherburne County, but especially Washington, Anoka, and Wright, all pay for beds that they don't need. And Sherburne's going to drop a bed. And so, and some of their commissioners are asking more questions. I think I said to Commissioner Ludwig recently, if the year ended today, Mille Lacs County would write a check for $150,000 for unused beds. And so that's a very difficult conversation to have with a county board on why we're writing these big checks when we're actually doing good correctional work and not placing kids in the facility. So, and one thing I really encourage Todd to do, and this is maybe where the commissioners on the board could be more vocal or have a strategy, is the next board meeting, full board meeting, isn't until October. And it felt like Todd was going to just, take our recommendations and then we wouldn't talk about it any further until October. And then all of a sudden, our next meeting after that, the budget is in February. Well, to me, we should be all working long and hard between now and October to come up with some type of plan. So we're not sitting here in February as counties going, gee, why are we writing this big check? Especially when counties are all suffering due to COVID. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. And if I can ask another question, I think the actual budget for this is housed in HHS, and I'm just wondering if Becky has any thoughts or a perspective.
Thank you. This is Becky Foss, Director of Health and Human Services. I do have some thoughts and perspectives on it. This past year, we were over budget with out-of-home placements, which we've acknowledged and talked about. And even with being over budget with placements, HHS still got a bill in February for, I think, $35,000 to $40,000 for unused beds from 2019. And so that was a hit to my budget. And then so far this year, we don't have a lot of kids in lockup. This is all a really good thing. Some of it's due to COVID. Some of it's just due to the really great work that's going on right now in Pine County. But as it stands today, I could get, you know, nearly an $80,000 bill at the end of the year that comes out of the HHS department. And that would be a tough pill to swallow. As everybody knows, we're doing furloughs, we're leaving some positions vacant, we're suspending some contracts. So we're really trying hard to minimize expenses because we don't know what's going to happen. And then if we get this large bill at the end of the year or beginning of next year, that's going to be just a real struggle. So I certainly understand that we don't want to harm the sheriff's office or their budget, but I guess I would ask people to really think long and hard about what it's doing to the HHS budget if we do nothing.
That's a good point.
Thanks for that perspective, Becky, because part of me says I was on that board for a long time and was convinced that it served a purpose to be part of that organization. So we had some place to go with kids, because there was a time when that place, if you weren't a member, they might not have a seat or a bed for you.
Right.
So then where do you go? Bemidji or Wilmer or wherever the next one was. Anyway, long ways away. And maybe the whole thing has changed. And part of it, in my mind, is like we built a jail that will hold 120 people if they're all the right kind of people. And I don't know if our jail population is 80 maybe now. But we still own the jail. We got to have a jail, you know? And so, is it a cost of doing business, or has the business changed enough so we don't have to have that business model anymore? And the one or two outliers that happen to us, we know that's going to happen, so we budget for it and it happens. I don't know. Or does the facility completely go away if everybody says we can't afford to be a member anymore? You guys I just think you guys are on top of it, and I'll let you keep giving us reports on where you think we should go.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to add, and I don't want to disclose the county publicly, but at this time, but as I indicated earlier, there is a county close by that's has indicated that they may pull out at the end of the year. You got to give a year notice, and so you know, depending on what the bed usage again looks like at the end of this year, it may be something to at least keep in the back of the mind about sharing a bed with that county, so you still have a foot in the door versus totally pulling out. But you know, there has been, and last comment, Commissioner Hallen, that there has been counties that flat out told them that, listen, you know, 10 years ago, it would have been difficult to get a bed, but you can't tell us that now, that, you know, we can roll the dice and probably still get in there, but you know, now they're going to raise that non-member fee. But anyway, just I thought I'd throw that out there. There might be worth discussion later in the year, if we're not making any progress with these other things, to maybe take a look at partnering with another county so we're not totally out of it.
That's a good point. Thank you. Did you have anything else to add, Matt?
No, I was just going to bring that up. We could share with another county and cut, you know, say, pay half a bed instead of a full bed. So.
Yep. Well, that's why we have you guys go to those meetings, and if we think if if you think we need to have a committee of the whole meeting, at some point, whether we do it online or however we do it, just to concentrate on this. It's a big item in Becky's budget. It's a big item for our kids, for the, what do you do with a kid if there's no place to put them and it's Friday afternoon? You stick a deputy in a car and send them to Bemidji, and then go pick them up on Sunday night? I don't know.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the other thing with some are closing, some facilities are closing. So
Right.
maybe that's gonna help, maybe it's gonna hurt, I don't know. You know, as far as, members or people buying in, but well, that's yet to be determined.
Okay, thank you very much. And Terry, before we let you go, I just want to point out that Terry has testified at the legislature on behalf of all the probation people in the state, and especially for Pine County, and he is going to testify again tomorrow. And we're happy to have him, because I told him last night in an email that he was, in my mind, he was like putting Gump Worsley in as a goalie in the Stanley Cup final. And if anybody doesn't know Gump Worsley, he was the leading goalie for the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers and the Minnesota North Stars. He had a long career from the 50s up into the early 70s, and he never wore a mask. Played goalie with no mask. And the story I remember about him, Terry, is one time in a Stanley Cup final game, it was down, it might even been overtime. There was a face-off right in front of his net, and he skates over to the referee and says, "So, how's your kid Nathan, or whoever it is, doing in college?" I mean, he was a cool guy. He wasn't, he just he played the game for the fun of it, and he cared more about what other people were doing with their lives than whatever. So anyway, Terry, we're thinking of you, and you'll do a great job representing us. And hopefully someday the state legislatures will figure out that we have a great delivery system, and they need to step up to the plate and fulfill their obligation that they made many years ago.
Well, Commissioner, I'm not sure if I should take that as a compliment when you compared me to a goalie that didn't wear a mask, first of all. But I did talk to our lobbyist this morning. The way it would work is if things go well tomorrow, it is the only thing on the agenda for tomorrow's hearing. Things go well tomorrow, goes to Ways and Means, and then to the floor on Friday. So hopefully by this weekend, we'll be funded, and we'll all have a good weekend. So we'll see what happens, and I'll try to remember to turn my camera on tomorrow.
Thank you. And it is a compliment, because in my opinion, Gump Worsley was one of the coolest guys ever to play the game. So not because he didn't wear a mask, just because he was a cool guy.
And Mr. Chair, if we can suffer one more comment on this topic. When Terry was testifying last time, the committee ended with some members with the sentiment that, well, this would be super nice, but too bad we have a budget deficit, so we're not going to do anything with it. And I paraphrase. But that was kind of the sentiment that it ended with. So for it to be back in special session, talking about funding, additional funding, which would be new money, is remarkable. And so it's certainly the probation officers as an organization have figured out how to marshal the right forces at the right time to keep this issue alive.
Yes, so thank you. Let's move on to a coronavirus update. Sam, still on?
I'm here. Can you hear? I
Okay.
double muted myself there for a second. Hello, everyone. Sam Lowe, Director of Public Health. Just to kind of give an overview of just where we're at globally, nationwide, down to Pine. We're at 8 million cases globally. So that number continues to tick about 130,000 new cases a day. It's kind of hovered around there for a while now. So that's still a lot of cases per day. In the US, we're at 2.1 million with 115,000 deaths. Models are currently predicting that we'll have about 200,000 deaths by October. And that doesn't include a second, third wave come this fall. So who knows? We are seeing, there are about 22 states right now that are seeing a pretty noticeable increase in cases beyond what just a normal steady influx would be. That's generally down in the South, in the Sun Belt area, some in the West, like California. And it's generally the states that were very quick to reopen. In early May, they were just gung-ho to reopen things. And that's where we're seeing these really substantial increases in cases. States that were more cautious to open and are just now starting to reopen in June or very late May have seen a different trajectory. So we are actually in that group, which is really good. And we're having a much slower increase, and we're actually seeing a drop right now in Minnesota in terms of number of cases per day. And it looks like it's kind of a combination of when did states reopen, how good are they at actually listening to the rules, and rules being social distancing, working from home, wearing masks. And if they're good about that, they tend to have these better, lower case numbers. So right now in Minnesota, we're sitting at a total of 30,882 cases to date with 1,300 deaths. Over the past week or so, we've been hovering around 300 cases a day, which is a significant improvement over 3 weeks ago when we were around 800 cases a day. So it's actually, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. So it's kind of a pleasant surprise at the moment. COVID hospitalizations are down, which is also good in Minnesota. But use for non-COVID related, ICU use for non-COVID related is up because we're allowing these elective procedures to happen again. So we really have about the same number of hospital beds available, but we can get people back in who have been waiting for a couple months. So that's actually a good thing too. And we've started to get testing numbers back from people who were tested because they were at either the vigils or the mass gatherings down in the cities or anywhere. And those people have had a very low positivity rate, which is a really good sign because it means that most people were wearing masks, which video evidence kind of suggests was true. Because they were wearing masks and actually trying to at least keep some distance at times, very few people are catching it from attending the gatherings. So that's really exciting. Pine County currently has 96 cases, or total of 96 cases. We don't currently have 96. And none of our recent cases have been in the prison. So they've just been kind of trickling in as we get them scattered around the county. We are doing all of our case investigation and contact tracing for them. So if they're not at the prison, we are the ones calling them and saying, hey, you need to stay home for this long. Where did you go? Who did you meet? And then we contact them. Unless it's, like they were around their husband. We assume they can, talk to their husbands. But other than that, we've been working with long-term care facilities to make sure they're getting connected to tests as they need it. The state's also doing some point and prevalence studies around where they'll go in and test an entire facility within a couple hours. So that's kind of being coordinated. And right now we're kind of in a lull and it's kind of exciting. It's kind of nice. I'm enjoying it while it lasts because I don't know if it's gonna last. I do think Minnesota in general is doing a really good job of listening to the rules, trying to wear masks when possible, when you're out and about, working from home still when you can. So it's positive, and we just don't want people to let up. because that's why we're doing so well, is because people are actually following through on these guidance. And the last thing is that there might be a seasonal component, but we don't know. So we will likely see an uptick in the fall, but since we don't know much about this disease at this point, we might not. And we can just all cross our fingers. But, so, we're not sure. But we're doing good. So keep up the good work of wearing masks, staying home as needed, working from home. Doing good.
Thank you. Any questions of Sam? Got
Mr. Chair.
anything? Yep,
Terry, I have an update as well.
yep.
Effective July 1st, probation will open up to the public to come to the window. Any questions, but they'll pay their local corrections fees. And then our case agent, our administrative assistant will go back to 5 days a week in the office. I think my case aide is going to still take some decent amount of vacation this winter or this summer anyway. So, but that will help the auditor recorders area there from getting questions, and it will ensure that our clients that don't have the ability to pay fees online can pay at the window. We'll mask up and nobody will come back into our spaces. I did check with Judge Martin last week, and it's basically my agents won't be needed in the building anytime soon or for the foreseeable future. The DOC agents are a little bit now, but their next big test will be the criminal jury trials, and so it'll be business as usual in terms of remote hearings for county probation officers.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So I can update on the CARES Act.
Yep.
So in March, Congress approved approximately $2 billion in coronavirus relief funding for the state of Minnesota. That was part of the CARES Act. And the federal government made direct appropriations to states and cities and counties of 500 people or more. So in Minnesota, that was only Hennepin and Ramsey County that have received the money. Cities and counties below 500,000 must rely on their state to provide the funding. Senate File 47 is the bill under consideration at the special session. This bill makes a direct appropriation to every county and each city and township of 200 people or more. The total appropriation to local government is approximately $841 million. The legislation provides funding on a per capita basis. It's approximately $25 per capita for townships, $75 per capita for cities, and $121 per capita for counties. And counties also receive an amount for cities and townships below 200 people. The eligible usage is outlined by the federal government, and generally the expenditure must be necessary due to the public health emergency due to COVID-19. The expenditures were not accounted for in the most recent agency budget, and the expenses were incurred from March 1st to December 30th, 2020. So a very narrow window of time. And then generally the money can be used for things such as plexiglass, technology to support telework, PPE, sanitizer, et cetera. At least 10% of the funds must be used for emergency financial assistance to individuals and families and for economic support to business. All city funds must be expended by November 15th and county funds by December 15th. And then unspent city funds roll to the county and unspent county funds roll back to the state. And anything not spent by the state by December 30th goes back to the federal government. The legislation is not approved yet, And so once it is approved, we'll need to move quickly to ensure we maximize the impact of funds on economic recovery to businesses in Pine County. Because of the significant amount of money, commissioners may want to assign a committee of jurisdictions to provide policy guidance and oversight. Because much of the funding is targeted at economic recovery, the Economic Development Committee might be a good choice, and that's Commissioners Mickrot and Moore. And then I've been in contact with the city administrators for Hinckley, Sandstone, and Pine City, and all of them have indicated they would like to consider a collaborative approach to the community funding. So assuming that SF 47 gets approved, it should allow about $3.6 million to flow to Pine County that we can use for community recovery and then also for our direct expenses.
David, I'm confused on that money. Does 3.6 million come to us and then we write checks to the cities and townships? Or do they get a direct appropriation?
If they're over 200 population or 200 or over, they get the money directly. So
okay.
We do
so
have
the 3.6 million or whatever we get, we can use for improvements we've made to operate at this point. And then 10% of that 3.6 million has to be used for to help businesses out of an economic bind, correct?
Yes, yes. And in that 3.6 million is a very small amount that accounts for the jurisdictions under 200. And I don't have that total, but it's not a significant amount of the 3.6 million.
So $360,000 we have to divide out to businesses. And I would ask Josh and John if they would take that on as a committee, but before you get too far down the road, once everybody understands what it is, maybe we should have a committee of the whole meeting so that, because I think we'll get a lot of questions from businesses and it would be, I would like to know, so I got some answers. So I think we start out at the committee level and then bring that back to the committee of the whole and then give it back to the committee. Does that make sense?
Yes. And if we wanted, is it easier to put something on the calendar when we're all here? Assuming that, I mean, if it's got to be approved quickly, right? All the smart money is saying it will get approved this week. We've got a phone call on Friday with the county administrators, and I would invite Josh and John to join that at 10 o'clock. And there may be some city council members on the call as well. We could schedule something next week, I guess would be my point, if that's easier for a committee of the whole.
Yeah, I think, will we know enough? I mean, I was thinking maybe the committee could meet next week and then we could come back with because we'll meet again on, we won't
It's not
meet
until
again.
July 7th.
7th.
Monday, the 29th is wide open if they want to come back by then, and the committee meets next week.
Or the 30th.
Or the 30th, yeah. Well, 30th is something. Well, that's tech. You got tech.
Technology meeting. So, yeah, the 29th or 30th. 29th would work fine for me. Just, I mean, I think the committee needs a little bit of time to get their feet wet before we get the whole group there.
Would tentatively then the 29th, does like 9 o'clock in the morning work?
Yep.
Yep.
And then the state of Minnesota, in order to access these funds, each jurisdiction has to certify that they will use the funds as allowed by law. And that certification has not been written, but we can submit it as early as the 22nd. And so I'm just wondering if the commissioners would want to delegate to me, the administrator, the authority to submit that certification on the 22nd.
I'll move that.
Matt moves it. Do we have a second?
What was that?
Was that maybe Commissioner Chafee on the phone?
Commissioner Moore.
Oh, it sounded like Commissioner Moore.
I think it was Josh, but his thing is going around and around and around. But I saw his lips moving, and I think I heard enough that he said he would second it. But he's frozen in time. And I saw something flash up that Chafee left the call. And I don't see him on there anymore.
So we have 3 commissioners active right now? Would another commissioner want to second it? And you still have 4? Good.
Is John Mickret still there? I'm not.
Yep, I'll second him.
Okay, there we go. So we got a motion made and seconded. Any discussion? The clerk will call the roll, knowing that we probably lost 2 people. Roxanne?
I think we're doing, can we do an audible on this with 2 here?
I'm not hearing Roxanne.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. District 4, Commissioner Mikrot.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Hallen.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
You back with us, Josh? I see him. Appears like he's hearing us, but I'm not hearing. It must not be.
Okay. So District 2, oh, no?
No, he froze up again.
Okay. And District 3, Commissioner Chafee.
Aye.
He's back, okay.
An aye from Chafee. Okay, that passed.
Because there was a little confusion on that vote, Mr. Chair, if I could just recap, it was 4-0 with Commissioner Moore unavailable.
Yes, that is correct. Okay. David, maybe you can follow up with Josh and John to make sure they're on board with the committee meeting next week.
Will do.
Okay. Any other coronavirus updates? We'll move on to some commissioner updates. I've been on the AMC Blue Ribbon Committee. That committee is working hard with the talking to legislators about the waivers, especially for Health and Human Services and for probation funding. But the Health and Human Services waivers, the number one priority, I guess, right now is to make sure that once the emergency order expires, that we have an extension, so we just don't have to go from one afternoon working the way we have been for the last 3 months to the next day working the way we did prior to this, because we're still across the state majority working from home. And so to comply with the way we did business 6 months ago would be very, very difficult. There doesn't seem to be a huge outpouring of people saying these waivers are the stupidest thing we ever did. We never should have done them. It's kind of the opposite, but it's like pulling teeth to get them to react to the fact that these really work, and let's put them in place either at least for 60 days or permanently. I mean, some of them seem, in my mind, they're just no-brainers, but we'll keep working with people. David, are we still on to meet with Representative Nelson tomorrow morning at 9?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So we will keep working on that. Arrowhead County Association. John, did you get to that?
Yes, I believe I reported that on their last meeting already.
That's what I thought. Council on Aging, I think I reported on that last time. Central Minnesota EMS.
Yes, I went Ludwig, June 5th. The highlight probably is they ordered, I think I reported last time that they ordered those sterilized gun sprayers for the ambulance and our squad cars, and when they come to a jurisdiction, everybody gets to use them. Well, they're all back ordered because of but there's 21. She calls it Operation Super Soaker over there. But anyway, there's 21 ordered and we're supposed to get them. And when they come, you'll know. The other highlight is they're out of naloxone. We did fund an order. So we ordered 200 doses. So they should be coming, hoping they'd be here this week. So you've heard anything? Jeff? Okay, yeah. So anyway, we'll see. We need those. And we're working on a new grant. Well, more update on that later. I don't know what's happening with that yet. So, but that was pretty much it.
Waste, garbage keeps coming in, and a lot of it because people seem to be spending a lot of time working on projects, and part of those projects include cleaning the garage and the shed and the spare bedroom or whatever. So one thing that has changed, I don't know if I reported, we had hired a trucking firm that pulled the trailers from the transfer stations to the landfill for the last several years. It has become very problematic, not having, sometimes their drivers wouldn't show up. They'd decide on their own to go home. And so we terminated that contract, bought our own tractor, and we're hiring another driver. We got another truck on order so we can be in control of our own destiny. With any new startup business, there have been a couple of hiccups, but nothing substantial. The other thing we're going to do is we can't get anybody to haul our leachate, and so we have bought our own trailer, and so we will be hauling leachate whenever we have drivers available. It's a constant battle, and that it's not raining this spring has really helped because there's a little less water going into the landfill, which means there's less leachate coming out. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on there. Library board?
Yeah, you got me back?
Yep, I got you, Josh.
Okay. Sorry about that. I must have died. Anyways, I did miss some meeting, but some highlights. I think I can't remember. They're moving into the new headquarters. I did email the director this morning to get a few more highlights, but I haven't got it back yet. But I think they had an on-site meeting at the new headquarters in Cambridge, so they're moving in. It was a little slowed up because they couldn't get some of the furniture. And then I'm trying to get a tentative date on when the libraries are going to open up for in-person again, but should be, I think they're talking fairly soon. So hopefully operations can start getting back there. I know I've received a few phone calls wondering when they're going to open, but we'll see. So thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Chemical Health Coalition.
Yes, I attended that one. We're still working on getting our one-on-one consultation interview surveys completed. Need to be done at the end of this month, hopefully. Going pretty well, but just want to get a few more. On to tobacco, we're looking at getting this compliance checks done this year sometime. They should be done once per year. Have a P&I grant that funds the alcohol compliance check, but will not fund tobacco. So we're hoping maybe the coalition will fund that somehow. So we're working with the sheriff department to see how that can be funded. It's approximately $500 per check. Trainings for this year, the Montana Institute training was moved out to September this year. And other than that, Becky Foss informed us that the legislature passed setting some funds aside for the opiate epidemic use. Money can be used for prevention and interventions. That's what we know this time, but more to come on that one, but it's something that we can use, I'm sure. So that's about it for that one.
Soil and Water, Matt?
Yep, we met June 10th. Pretty much just a normal meeting. Highlight is I've said this a couple of meetings, but the forestry and the management plans and the stuff he's doing with the sustainable stuff. He's doing a great job, and there's a lot of acreage coming in for them and keeping them quite busy. He's actually a little bit behind right now, and I think with some of the COVID stuff too. But that's a good, strong program that's happening there. There was some federal people there too, this meeting from the NCRS, and gave reports. And I did ask about the soil survey, and we had some discussion about that. It's 30% complete in Pine County. And they advise that they're now using the LiDAR, so it's much more accurate, and they get a lot more work done from the office, and they can do less on-site digging and verification of soil types. But they're still doing those, and I just learned today that they had outreach to our county to store some equipment here through Caleb, so they are working on that. Oh, and then I should add, I did speak with Jill at the, before the meeting started. I told her that we were having some discussion about maybe taking the water plant back into the county. So, and I told her we'd reach out to her more on that if we have a meeting, so we can meet with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Law Library.
I did miss that one as well. So, and I would refer it to Reese, but I do believe he missed it too. So I think we got one rescheduled here pretty quick. So
I was waiting for Reese's report. Doggone it.
Everybody missed is the report.
Okay. All right. Jobs and training. The jobs and training meeting was exactly at the same time as the Blue Ribbon Committee, and they were both very, very interesting. But it was very, very interesting because I had one of them on my iPad and one of them on my laptop, and I was trying to toggle back and forth, and so I probably didn't do a good job. But I I do know that the workforce, unemployment numbers, of course, it's not surprising, have gone about triple from what they were in January, February. There is some predictions that will change as things start to open up rather quickly. But it's interesting in the businesses I've talked to that they're a little reluctant to call all their help back full time because nobody wants to come and work part time because they're making such good money on unemployment. Then they don't want to screw that up. So it's kind of a catch-22. So I don't know how long that unemployment is going to continue, but it's kind of a crazy thing that's going on. People that are working, I've talked to many people who have small businesses that are in the contracting world are so darn busy they cannot see straight. And they've had a stretch of weather that they can't hardly imagine how long it's been since they're almost hoping for a rain day so they can get rested up and fix on stuff. But it's been a incredible run for a couple of months for them. And I do know this, when you go to the lumber yard or the hardware store, there are just some materials you cannot get. They're out of them. And we've relied a lot on, one thing is screws for screwing together a deck or something. And apparently the containers that full of screws that we used to get from China are not coming, and the US suppliers can't make screws as fast as people are using them. So that's what I've found out anyway. Board of Equalization.
Going good.
I think Lori did an outstanding job and having things prepared, and her staff. We should make sure they get a big thank you for the people that were there. I believe except for the one guy that, well, he was kind of mad at the world anyway. It wasn't mad at the staff as much as he was just mad. But the rest of the people thought the staff did a outstanding job of coming back and double checking their work and making sure that, you know, they didn't agree with what the staff did, but they didn't say the staff was a bunch of lazy bums. They complimented them on their work. So that makes me feel good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I do have another when you get there.
Yep, go ahead. I'm there.
Okay, so we the Public Safety Committee with AMC, we had an emergency meeting Monday.
Okay.
It was like 2 days notice, but we went over 19 proposals for law enforcement. Anyway, we went over the 2-hour AMC limit on the meeting also. But it was a really good, outspoken meeting, and we put enough information together so they could take it to the executive committee there and bring it to the legislative body. So it was worth the time.
Thank you. Thanks for being on that committee too, by the way.
Yeah.
I got an email, I think this morning I reported that I'd gotten an email that there are 10 fairs that in the state of Minnesota that have not canceled. I just got another email that it's now down to 8. So if you're gonna go have fair food, the closest place I know is Rock Creek. The Magels have several of their food stands set up there. So you can go have corn dogs and French fries and cheese curds, and I'm not sure what else is there, but any other business we need? Mark, I do have to ask you for a road update, how the projects are going. Are you prepared to give us a little
We've got 67 pretty well wrapped up. Just doing the cleanup and seeding and that here this week, and gravel. Now they're starting up on 52, and our crews are doing some work on 52. We're getting ready to pave that. The bridge on 52 is open, so that was kind of the carryover work. We've got bids out to do 3 box culvert projects. One's on 27 by Grindstone Lake, one is east of Sandstone on 30, and one is up on 150. I guess you'd call that kind of the Finlayson area. So those are coming out. We've got our paving bids will be coming out in a few weeks here. We've kind of got Main Street and Pine City scheduled for mid-August. Want to get that all wrapped up before if school starts. And there's a paving set down here in 107, 108, 70, and Main Street, 61 in Pine City. And then up north, we've got all those on 52 and 157. And then there's a couple city streets for Sturgeon Lake that we are helping them out with. So those are kind of our projects for this year. Looks like the sales tax isn't really, actually we had more sales tax from, if you compare the months from last year, I think for April, March was a little down, but I don't think we're going to see any major hiccups on the sales tax collection. So that's some positive news. So.
Anyway, thanks, Mark. And I do need to, I gotta talk offline. I got a question for you too, so I'll give you a jingle when the meeting's over. Anything else we need to work on? If not, keep up the good work. Stay safe, stay cool. One of these days I might get caught up on all those projects around the house, but I think Pinterest keeps pushing that stuff out the door, so somebody I'm married to keeps finding them. We should do this. Okay. Anyway, we'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.